With Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Colvin. The town of Barnstable is bursting with bivalves. That's right, oyster season is now underway. It began this past weekend and will stay open until Sunday, April 1st, 2012. Several areas in town are now open for the harvest of soft-shell clams and quahogs and the recreational harvest of oysters. In preparation for oyster season, we spoke with Natural Resource Officer Amy Rado on Friday morning's episode of Barnstable This Morning. Amy hit the highlights of oyster season and filled us in on the important things to know if you'd like to head out to the flats and bring home a catch of your own. Let's watch as Amy fills us in on all things oyster and shellfish in the town of Barnstable.
It's probably one of the most exciting openings for local shellfishers. People really love their oysters in this town. What I can tell you is that Sunday, October 30th, the low tide on the south side of town is at 8:41 in the morning, and on the north side of town it's at 9:11 in the morning. Sunrise itself is at 7:13, so you can legally go out to harvest shellfish at 6:43 in the morning on Sunday.
Okay, so it's a half an hour before sunrise?
Yep. It's 2 hours before low tide, but I do not doubt that people will be out there that early trying to get parking, because, like I said, it is kind of a little bit of pandemonium on opening day. The two places that we do have opening for oysters on Sunday would be Scudder Lane on the north side of town and Bridge Street in Osterville on the south side of town.
Okay, great. So those are the two best areas to get. Now, this is recreational oyster shellfishing, correct?
Yes, in this town we have no commercial oyster shellfishery.
Okay, that's definitely good to know. So people obviously have to have a license to shellfish. Can they get that today to be able to go out there on Sunday?
They can. The office will be open until 4:15 this afternoon, so you can come in and certainly get your shellfish permit. There were a bunch of people that came in, yesterday, and I'm sure the rest of this week.
Okay, how much does it cost to get the shellfish permit?
If you live in town, if you're a resident in the town of Barnstable, and you are under the age of 65, you can get your permit for $30. If you're over the age of 65, you can get it for $20. And if you do not own property or pay taxes in the town of Barnstable, then it is $120. And the permit would be good until March 1st of next year.
Okay, great. And you can get a permit for your whole family, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So what else do we need to know? I know that there are some areas that are opening this Saturday, but some that don't open until later on, until Wednesday, November 2nd. Tell me about those areas.
Yes, one important thing to know, and sometimes there's a little bit of confusion, is that typically in the past we had put our southside oysters off of Bay Street, which is North Bay. We did not plant any oysters at Bay Street this year. We only put quahogs there from the Centerville River, and North Bay annually does not open until November 1st. It's a state closure. It's a water quality closure. And so Bay Street itself and the rest of North Bay will be opening up to recreational harvest on Wednesday, November 2nd. And we also have on Wednesday, November 2nd, a small area opening at the end of the Sepuit River and moving into Katuitt Bay. It's an area known as Pirates Cove. It's a summer closure. Not a lot of people utilize it. It's really only accessible by boat unless you live in or have friends that live in oyster harbors. And there are no oysters there. It's strictly quahogs.
Okay, and then the West Bay recreational shellfishing area is actually closing pretty soon, right?
It is. This is huge. This is definitely a good thing for people to know for the winter. It is an area that is continuously hit year-round, and we're thinking that because the smaller quahogs that are there are getting continuously dug up all year, that they're having a hard time actually getting to legal size. So what we're doing is we're closing the rec area at Bridge Street starting November 2nd, and we'll be reopening it later in the spring of next year.
So in hopes of, letting the shellfish that are in there grow to a legal size.
Exactly, yeah, there's a lot of seed there, and we seem to be seeing a lot of seeds staying seed size, so
great.
So needs a rest.
Exactly. Give it a little break, let them come back, and then you can come back, and hopefully there'll be something there for those fishermen to take.
Exactly.
Amy, let's talk a little bit about the regulations when it comes to getting the oysters. Of course, there are size limitations and there are other limitations. So let's start on talking about the size limit on oysters. What do we need to know?
Okay, well, what you definitely need to know is that in order for you to keep an oyster, it legally has to be 3 inches long. That 3 inches can be if you can get 3 inches any direction on that oyster, we'll let you keep it. And it just so happens if you purchase your shellfish gauge here, it's a 3-way gauge that measures quahogs, steamers, and oysters, and it would be the length of the entire gauge itself that is 3 inches. I know some people lose them during the season, so it also happens to be the length of your shellfish permit.
Okay.
There is an emerging trend where people are using 3-inch PVC rings. We do have an organization in town bars that literally gives us, tons of these things at the beginning of oyster season to pass out to people. One thing that I do stress, and especially if you shellfish at Scudder Lane, is that we grow our oysters from culch bags that come filled with shell fragments. So as the oysters start to grow on these shell fragments, they sometimes don't separate. They'll grow in clusters. So people need to be careful that are using these rings to make sure that they're measuring just oyster and not oyster and what we call mother shell, which is the leftover shell fragment that the oyster started originally growing on.
Right. Now, is it tricky to tell if the oyster has a mother shell attached to it, or is it pretty obvious?
It can be very obvious sometimes. Sometimes it is difficult to tell, and of course that's why we sit at Scudder Lane for, literally sometimes 4 hours of your day, is to make sure that people are doing the right thing, and we will help educate you along the way. We're not, we won't really bring the hammer down on you if you make a mistake.
Exactly. Now, is there typically an officer out there all the time monitoring people's catch and checking the baskets?
This time of year, we actually keep seasonal staff on longer. We get everybody deputized, so we'll have our natural resource officers out there, we'll have the shellfish biologist out there, we'll have the shellfish technician out there. There will be tons of enforcement during oyster season, as there is every year.
Great. Now, of course, we've talked about the size limits. How about the amount that you're allowed to take per week or per day recreationally?
Yep, you're actually only allowed a half a peck of oysters, which is if you have the wire baskets that we actually require you to have as a regulation. It's a peck basket. It's a 10-quart basket. You're allowed half of that, which there's actually a line sort of in the middle of the basket. Because the baskets are beveled, they're smaller at the bottom, we give you about an inch over that mark.
Okay, great. Now, before getting your shellfish license, do you have to take a class or, understand how to go out there and gather, or can anyone just walk in and grab a license?
Pretty much anybody can walk in and grab a license. We do have very knowledgeable staff here, and there's always somebody around that can answer any questions that a novice would have. We do throughout the rest of the year offer classes to people that haven't shellfished before. And like I said, we're there on the scene, so if you ever have a question or, an issue or a concern, you can certainly bring them up with us then.
Sure. Is there equipment that you must have before going out there to try to gather the oysters? I'm guessing that you probably need to have a shellfish gauge.
You certainly need to have a shellfish gauge, because if we catch you with anything more than 5% seed, which would be if you had, 100 oysters, which you're not even going to get in a half pack, only 5 of those would allow to be undersized.
Okay.
It's a $300 fine if you're caught with more than that. So the shellfish gauge is extremely important. The pack basket is important because it helps keep you within your allowed limits. And then literally the oysters are laying on top of the sand, so if you want to go out and you just have gloves and you just have boots and that's how you want to harvest them, you should be able to do it that way. It should be a pretty decent tide on that morning. But a lot of people will take basket rakes and go into the water and work subtidally.
Again, some things to keep in mind if you'd like to harvest oysters. The minimum legal harvest size is 3 inches at the longest length. You may not harvest more than a half peck per calendar week. And of course, you must have a shellfish license to harvest oysters and other shellfish. You can obtain a license at Natural Resources headquarters on Finney's Lane. More information is available online at town.barnstable.ma.us. With Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Colvin.